restlessness as the sign of a disordered spirit. We're going to focus in on this particular vice in this post. It's about 62 AD. Nero rules in Rome. Seneca, his mentor, has pulled out of political engagement and has retired to private life. A few years later, Seneca will actually commit suicide under the orders of Nero, who accuses him of plotting against him. A few years later, Peter will be martyred in Rome, and that's where he writes 2 Peter from. The passage we're going to look at in this post is the moral letters to Lucilius, Epistolae Morales ad Lucilium, which Seneca wrote just a few years before his death. These fantastic letters, this collection of letters, and you can find them on Wikisources, just type in letters to Lucilium. They're short little, maybe 3 or 4 paragraphs each, about 120 little letters. And here the old Seneca, the experienced philosopher, is writing to a young man with an invitation to virtuous good living. It is also a treatise where Seneca looks deep and hard into his own conscience, seeking out the fundamentals of virtue, perhaps actually against the backdrop of his own failure with Nero. Well, whether Seneca failed or whether Nero failed, probably both. But certainly it's obvious to Seneca now that his main tutee, Nero, is a failure in terms of the virtues that he would have liked to see him. Although this is a long time before the internet was even dreamed of, and therefore the vices that come with the internet were not even in Seneca's most remote imagination. What Seneca actually says here, it speaks in a way which is uncannily prophetic for our days. It speaks about the disordered spirit that comes with restless, superficial engagement. And today, for example, Nicholas Carr, in his famous book, The Shallows, What Internet is Doing to Our Brains, he writes similarly about the consequences of this restless, superficial engagement with sources, in this case with internet. Now, Seneca clearly is not writing about the internet. He is though writing about the vice of restlessness. So here are some excerpts from the letter. I'm just going to read it to you, and then I'll offer up a few comments for us as theological educators in particular. So here's what Seneca writes. Judging by what you write me, and by what I hear, I'm forming a good opinion regarding your future. You do not run hither and thither to distract yourself by changing your abode, for such restlessness is the sign of a disordered spirit. The primary indication to my thinking of a well-ordered mind is a man's ability to remain in one place and linger in his own company. Be careful, however, lest this reading of many authors and books of every sort may tend to make you discursive and unsteady. You must linger among a limited number of master thinkers and digest their works, if you would derive ideas which shall win firm hold in your mind. Everywhere means nowhere. When a person spends all of his time in foreign travel, he ends by having many acquaintances but no friends. And the same thing must hold true of men who seek intimate acquaintance with no single author, but visit them all in a hasty and hurried manner. Food does no good and is not assimilated into the body if it leaves the stomach as soon as it is eaten. Nothing hinders a cure so much as frequent change of medicine. No wound will heal where one salve is tried after another. A plant which is often moved can never grow strong. There is nothing so efficacious that it can be helpful while it is being shifted about. And in reading of many books is distraction. Accordingly, since you cannot read all the books which you may possess, it is enough to possess only as many books as you can read. But you reply, I wish to dip first into one book and then into another. I tell you, that is the sign of an over-nice appetite to toy with many dishes. For when they are manifold and varied, they cloy, but they do not nourish. So you should always read standard authors, and when you crave a change, fall back upon those whom you read before. Each day acquire something that will fortify you against poverty, against death, indeed against other misfortunes as well. And after you have run out of thoughts and digested them, go back. So I offer up a few comments for us as theological educators committed to character education. First, we need to name the vice of restlessness and to help our students identify this in their living. Now, some of these can be particularly accentuated by the wealth of information and stimuli on the internet. There's just so much out there, and this restlessness is actually stimulated by the wealth of information, but also the wealth of information in our own schools, in our libraries, in our school activities, our seminars, our workshops, our special events, our media, our online course-related sources. There's just so much out there for our students today. And the vice of restlessness needs to be named. It is when our students run, as Seneca said, hither and thither, and continually change abode. This is not good. 2, we need to design learning communities and cultures where students and staff can remain in one place and linger in their own company, to use Seneca's words. This is also known as the spiritual discipline of solitude. And here actually we see an example of the overlap between spiritual disciplines and character discourse. In our communities we have so much going on, and it is all good, but Seneca here reminds us that it may instill vice. The overabundance of activities can lead us to be restless and distracted. Third piece of advice, we need to train students in using sources, whether they are our libraries or online resources. Seneca says too many authors, too many books can make a student unsteady and unable to digest the work of the master thinkers. There are some master thinkers, their work needs to be digested slowly. And as faculty, we can be guilty of this. We can indirectly tempt our students sometimes to vice when we demand of a student that in their essay they quote a vast number of sources, an ample bibliography, and in a relatively short essay. And indirectly what we're asking them is to be everywhere, and they may end up being nowhere, simply pasting together a long string of pearls of quotes from different authors, but never having engaged deeply with any one of these thinkers. Fourthly, we need to think carefully of our survey courses when we design curricula. Certainly we try to give the lay of the land, and at some levels this is very appropriate in survey courses. But then we need to, using Seneca's words, keep the plants in one place to make them strong. We need to heal the wounds with the same medicine, and not with a constant critical engagement and comparison of different medicines. And oftentimes we can fall into that. The enhancement of critical thinking skills, students are continually comparing sources, criticizing sources, rather than allowing these sources to be like medicine to them. And this might apply particularly well to biblical studies, but other disciplines are certainly also involved. And fifthly, we suggest that our students only possess the books they can read. This is what Seneca says. Don't own any more books than you can read. I don't know if I agree fully with this. It'd be interesting to hear your thoughts in the comment box below. Those of us that are without sin here cast the first stone. How many of us have read all of the books in our libraries? And surely internet access to EBSCO, it makes this so much more difficult. There's so much more that we have access to than we can actually read. But surely there's some wisdom here. And if nothing else, perhaps to consider finishing a book a little more often before dipping into another one, or to scroll down to the bottom of an article or a blog post before simply quickly surfing away. Lest we have indeed an education, as Seneca says, of many acquaintances, but no friends. So here's the challenge for today. Let's work on the vice of restlessness.